what he did to bring us back from the floods, for what he has done for this country. The 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Wow. Thank you. It is great to be back in South Georgia. And I want to thank everybody who's been there. Sanford Bishop and I have been together since he ran for Congress and I ran for president. And Calvin Smyrie was right there with him. He just completed a couple years ago 48 years in the Georgia legislature, longest serving legislature in the country. Senator Sims, County Chair Joyce Barlow, former Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor. You gave a good talk there, man. I think you still got it. Former Mayor Dorothy Hubbard and Bishop Sneed. And I want to thank the band. Look, when I volunteered to help Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, I told them, I said, send somebody else to the big places, somebody that needs the TV coverage. I said, send me to the country. I know where I belong. Look, this is in your hands. Our adversaries are clever. For example, I was just talking about it. They could have contested more races down here, but they didn't do it because they want your turnout to be low. They want you to go to sleep, to think you don't make a difference. And you may make more difference than you ever have. Raphael Warnock is a senator today because of the turnout in South Georgia, and you know it. And John Ossoff, you made his career. All the other votes are important, but look, there are 7 swing states that are going to determine the outcome of this election. And it's disgusting and hard to understand, but they're all tight as a tick. And if you show up as you did in 2020, we'll carry Georgia. And if you don't, we probably won't. You know it, I know it. Don't feel the pressure. Just go out and empower people. Here's what I want you to know. The congressman said some nice things, but we did set an 8-year record for jobs in America. We did have the only period since before World War II when the bottom 20% of the electorate in income had their income go up in percentage terms even more than the top 20%. That had not happened. Everybody said, oh, inequality was getting worse. It was, except in the 90s when you let me have a chance to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Now, since President Biden and Kamala Harris have been there, they're going to give you the biggest number of new jobs in 4 years in American history. And our Republican friends say, well, you should ignore that because of inflation. You got to vote them out because of inflation. Trump was there, we had no inflation. Well, it's kind of hard to have inflation when the economy collapses. COVID broke the economy. You remember COVID? He said it would never reach America. Then he said, oh, it'll just be here for a day or two and it'll be gone. No big deal. And then 1 million people died, more or less. This is a choice between going back and going forward. That's true. but it's also a choice about how we live and how we think. If you want somebody who's great at blaming and dividing, we can't compete with Trump. I mean, it's all blame, brag, and divide, right? Sun came up this morning. I made it happen. Only I could have made it happen. Then this horrible storm hits our neighbors in North Carolina after Florida. But because by the time it got to North Carolina, it hit where they normally never hit, in the western part of North Carolina, hurting Asheville, a place I love. I've been there many, many times, and all the places around. Well, Asheville is a Democratic town, but the counties around it are heavily Republican. So it didn't take even a day before a Republican member of Congress claimed that the deep state had figured out how to take control of this terrible storm and make sure it only hit the areas where they have. I thought, we wish, right? I mean, give me a break. Just because they would do that if they could doesn't mean we would do it if we could. Nobody believes that. But they have to do it because it's what they do. They blame and divide and build resentment. Kamala Harris wants to turn the page and give us an opportunity society that we have to build together. That required us to work together. That requires us to be fair to each other, to treat each other decently so we can take advantage of this. I am telling you, I have spent a lifetime now working on economics. It took me 10 years when I was governor to help my state get over the farm collapse in the 1980s. But when I ran for president, and every month we were first or second in the country in job growth. But I didn't do it all at once, and I didn't do it alone. We worked at it. You know, most things that are worth having require working for. And I don't care what anybody tells you, cooperation is better than constant conflict. Building is better than constant blaming. And resentment and revenge never amount to much. I'm not a kid anymore, in case you hadn't noticed. And I think very little about the people that I beat. But I think a lot about the people I work with to lift people up, to create jobs, to start businesses, to promote peace, to give children a better chance. That's what this is about. I'm telling you, Hillary's known Kamala Harris for 30 years, but I've only gotten to know her well in the last few years. And I've gotten to know her husband well because he's a friend of my son-in-law, who's a world-class guy. I believe, and I would not be here if I did not believe it, I believe she has the ability to be a really fine, effective, transforming president. And we need to give her that chance. Tim Waltz is easy for me to identify with. He reminds me of half the teachers I had in school. But it's important not to make too much of the caricature. This man was a significant congressman when he became the second Democrat since 1892 to win his district. And then when he became governor, he made a real difference in education, in gun safety, in health care. He is a consequential governor. He got things done, and he was working all the time to make sure that everybody was helped, that everybody could go forward together. Now, you look at what we're facing now. Let's just take healthcare. One party, with their 2025 project, still wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act and get rid of the protections for people with pre-existing conditions. I don't know if you saw that memorable vice presidential debate. And a lot of people were gagging when Mr. Vance said he never advocated taking away a woman's right to choose. But the real whopper he told was when he said that Donald Trump stabilized the Affordable Care Act. He didn't stabilize it, he put it on life support. And he tried to put a stake in its heart. And that's why nobody remembers anything. Just back in 2018, remember that was only 6 years ago, the Democrats won the biggest midterm election in percentage terms, 8.5%, in 100 years because they tried to take away the protections we have for people with pre-existing condition, and now they want to do it all over again. They'll get rid of the $2,000 a year limit on what seniors on Medicare have to pay for drugs. They'll get rid of the $35 a month cap on diabetes medicine, on insulin. That's a big deal because it affects so many people. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they want to extend the $35 cap and the $2,000 a year loss to people in all health programs at all ages. Now look at inflation. I know a little something about that. Remember, I gave you the first balanced budget in 30 years and the first three surpluses in 70 years. So I know how to be tight with a dollar. But the truth is, if you look at the economic plans, the Trump plan is more than twice as expensive as the Harris plan, and it'll help less than half the people because most of it goes to very rich people and big corporations. So for less than half the money, she helps more than twice as many people. $25,000 in help to pay a down payment on new housing to try to get the housing market going again. Increasing the child tax credit. When we doubled that when I was president, it moved 7 million people out of poverty. And that was 30 years ago. So you can only imagine what it's going to do now. She has very specific plans that we know will work, that are focused on you. Now, Trump says things that sound good till you think about them. Really, they do. I mean, vote for me and I will put a 20% tariff on everything. Well, here's the deal. It's a good thing to put a tariff on something that you can produce here if we're getting worked over by our competitors. So we needed the CHIPS Act that President Biden sponsored and passed. We needed the infrastructure bill that both Biden and Trump promised, but only Biden delivered. Let's not forget that. But if you put a tariff on everything, say you're just adding 10% of the cost of everything you buy that is not going to immediately be made in America. So all the surveys show that rich people will get richer under Trump's plan, but the average family will pay another couple of $1,000s a year in what is effectively a sales tax. I'm telling you, I've been doing this a long time. Her plan is better. It'll help more people. It won't add as much to the national debt. It will spark more growth. We'll be better off. It's far better for the environment. And if we haven't learned enough from these two deadly storms, we're beyond help if we don't think we have to do something to reduce the pressure for climate change. And in healthcare, hers is better than a country mile. And I haven't even talked about them. This is a sneak attack on a woman's right to choose, this whole 2025 thing. Don't you believe otherwise. One thing you got to give it to our friends on the far right, they never give up. And they're depending on you to give up. You got the numbers. You know you can win this election. You know you can. But you have to show up. And I'm telling you, with all my heart, I believe that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are worth showing up for, and you will be proud of it for the rest of your life. So, we got a lot of hay in the barn, America. We're still, with all this inflation, we're still the best positioned country in the world for the next 20 or 30 years. By far, it's not close. And inflation is coming down. The Federal Reserve has finally lowered interest rates. That's going to lower mortgage rates and borrowing rates generally. And one of the problems we got is when people kept telling you that inflation was down, you couldn't tell at the grocery store or the pump. There's a reason for that. The economists say that food prices change so much and fuel prices change so much, we can't put them in core inflation because there's no trend. It'll be up one month, down another. But here's why it affects you. Maybe you've got a locally owned grocery store here that you shop at, and they do the best they can. And if they're charging you more than you think you should pay, it's because they're having to pay more for food wholesale. But most of the grocery market now is heavily concentrated in a few big owners, Whole Foods and the other chains and all that. They earn a surprisingly low profit margin, but they're selling to a zillion people, right? So if I'm selling something to 1 million people and my normal margin is 3%, if I get to charge 4, I'm a rich person. That's what's going on with the food. In other words, it's not like the profit margins have gone way up. They don't have to go way up. So this problem has largely been left to the states for 100 years. It's called price gouging. That is, if I can control a price without selling less, if I can raise the price without selling less, that's called price gouging. That belongs in state law, historically. Kamala Harris is the only candidate who has said that with so much concentration in the grocery market, we have got to have a national price gouging law so the Justice Department can look at it. Because if it's inflation they can't avoid, that's fine. We don't want to put them out of business. But if they're trying to put you out of business, that's not fine. And that's just one example. Now, still, most people don't know that. That is a big deal, that she is the only candidate with any plan that will actually give us a practical way to deal with this grocery problem without sticking it to honest people doing their best to run a grocery store and selling you food at reasonable prices. It's the only way. And we should be jumping up and down. But why aren't we jumping up and down? Because we live in an era dominated by social media when all that matters is a 10-second hit job. I'm telling you, I've been doing this a long time. You will be proud if you vote for her. I believe she'll be a very positive, good president. I believe Tim Walz will be successful. And I believe that there's a lot of people in South Georgia that will never forgive themselves if they do not show up and vote and they allow Georgia to go the wrong way. We need you. I'm pleading with you. You can do it, and think how happy you will be on election night. God bless you.